All right, friend. Hope you got your pen ready. Hope you have your notebook ready. Welcome to Mazzaroth. As we learn that most astronomy and most astrological record-keeping abilities had its early findings of all civilizations with major influences pointing back to Hebraic roots. The word Mazzaroth itself is a Hebrew word for constellations. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, we have this phraseology: the purpose of the sun, moon, and stars. You ready for this? Is for times, signs, and seasons. That's why they exist, to communicate. This word seasons is moed. It means appointed, an appointment. These seasons, this appointment. If you have a dentist appointment, you mark down a specific day. Why? Because you don't want to miss the appointment. There's meeting moments of the creator of the cosmos in desire with his creation. Humans can meet with God in a special way on these appointments of meeting, these special seasons or holidays, these festivals. These appointments of when God meets with man. Here is a picture of a calendar. Nisan, you see here, 1. God told Moses that this will be the beginning. When they celebrate Passover, the month of Nisan, will be the first of months. This is recorded in Exodus chapter 12. He said this will now be a first of months. So he's instituting a new calendar. What does that tell you and I? There was a different calendar before. Let's stick with this particular new calendar that is given to Moses and the Jewish people. Nisan, first of the calendar now. It's a spiritual calendar. Begins with Passover. You have the spring festivals or seasons, appointments. You got Passover, first fruits, Pentecost, and unleavened bread. Some time passes, and then you've got the fall festivals here. Trumpets, atonement, and Sukkot, which is tabernacles. Those are in the fall. Notice here that trumpets begins in September sometime in mid-late. This is why it's different on the English calendar. You know, our calendars, it's a little bit different each year. Why is that? Because the Hebraic calendars go off of a lunar cycle. We go off of a solar cycle. So this is why it's a little different each year. It's never on the exact same day. Hebrews 10, all those things written with Moses was for a shadow, to point to something, to point to someone. They would be pointing to things. Well, let's look at this. These festivals, what were they pointing to? So Nisan, you've got the spring feasts, and then fall feasts. You have mostly in Tishri. You've got trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. Something. Well, let's look at what the template is, and then we'll be able to discover what they're pointing to. In the midst of his writings, he put stringent, strong warnings. Do not deviate from the purity of what we're talking with the sons of Issachar and Levi with these specific moments here. Don't deviate. And that's what a lot of other cultures did. They saw concepts and ideas, and they just kind of twisted it. They kind of went into idolatry and the worship of stars and the worship, because they thought that the wandering stars, the planets, they thought they were gods, like these angelic beings to give us power and things of that nature. That's called astromancy. When you worship the stars for and tried to employ the stars as if they were human or something like that. And it's different to give personification. Oh, Venus gives her light. That's poetic. But when you go into worship thinking it's an entity to be revered in worship, you just now broke the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And that's what they were doing. They thought these were gods that would be worshipped. And so that's different than what we are going after. Pagan astrology led people away from the Creator. Mazzaroth draws you into relationship with the Creator with its messages. There is a holy way to process the messages from the stars. Astronomy. So as Moses wrote these encouragements down, these festivals and feasts, he said, do not go the way of their gods and their astrologers. That word astrologers there that we were given warning of is Habar. Habar and Ashvath. Habar is someone who engages in horoscopes, trying to interpret heavenly bodies to dictate futuristic events of nations or peoples, oftentimes used in configuration of kings or commercial practices to stimulate wealth or favorable outcomes. There's danger and deception that awaits these kinds of approaches outside of God's prescribed practices of the heavenly bodies. Habar is someone who engages in horoscopes, in astromancy, this worship for outcomes. If the planet is over here, then that means, king, you should give your ceremony over here, and the gods will bestow favor upon you. That's that kind of thing. The Bible forbids that. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to try to predict people's future with the sun, moon, and stars. The Bible forbids that. The other word in Hebrew for astrologer is Ashvath. This is a conjurer, okay? This enchanter, this conjurer of enchantments. I want you to think of Calypso from the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, the modern day parable, okay? Think of her. Think of frog eyes and potions and just witchcraft. That the perverted sciences of supernatural renderings that take you away from Creator, that take you away from relationship with God. You see, those are the words that are used here. The term astrology in itself, studying of the stars, or astronomy, they're kind of intermingled. The study of the astros, study of the stars. Okay, so that forbiddance is more of a witchcraft concept, more of a perversion of supernatural renderings and trying to foretell, and you're not supposed to do that. That's forbidden. But to look at the stars, to receive understandings of what he's communicating from the stars, that's totally different. When done the way the Judeo-Christian roots is, that's pure, that's holy. The others is an abomination. The other leads you away from God. This approach brings you closer to God. It brings you in awe and wonder of his handiwork, his strategy, his teachings, as Psalm 19 says. So do not have fear when you approach learning the stars. You're not supposed to fear that. Matter of fact, we have in recorded scripture in Acts 28, we have the words Pollux and Castor, at the heads of the ship there with Saul. After 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. So Castor and Pollux. What's Castor and Pollux? What does this talk about in Acts chapter 28? Well, when they boarded the ships, on the front of the ships, they had two signs, one of Pollux and Castor, okay? These are the head stars of Gemini. Constellation Gemini is that of two brothers. One's a demigod and one is fully flesh. Okay, that's what the story will render it. And so here we have what they're pointing to. Back in the day, to be hopeful of safe passage and victorious in your wars at sea, you would have Pollux and Castor as an ensign on your ship. It's kind of like a good luck charm. That's the way they use it. Because the story is that they would go out. The stories that they passed down from generation to generation was that these two warriors were victorious in all their battles and what have you. Pollux and Castor. These are the two head stars of the constellation Gemini. If talking about the stars was evil and demonic, they would not be mentioned in Holy Scripture. Well, if the heavens declare the story of the Son of God, Messiah, if they reveal his story, where does the story begin? Well, the story begins by looking at to some of the science, the record keeping of astronomical alignments. So let's look at the major constellation. So how is a constellation formed? Who makes the rules? Okay. So we had human awareness of God-named constellations as early in historical writings as Job, in which we see are passed down from the sons of Noah, right after the flood. As stars were discovered in those areas of those already pre-named God-named constellations, they would name the star after an inspired moment. A lot of times they would feel inspiration and they would get a name, But a lot of times, also, they may not have had some kind of inspiration. They would have put like, oh, that's by, the bear. So we'll put elbow of the bear. What do you want to name the star? We just found it in our telescope. Call it the elbow of the bear. Why would they call it like that? Because they already know that's the constellation area of Ursa Major or Ursa Minor, the bear, its cups. Or maybe a new star was found in Orion. Well, they would name that star like, oh, the belt of Orion, or the sword, or, the warrior, that kind of, the foot of the warrior, Rigel, right? And so you've got the God-named constellation, and then as stars were discovered, as telescopes got better, they would see what's that location, and then that's what they would name that according to that main location. Nowadays, we have the IAU, International Astronomical Union, to keep up for the last 100 years. They keep up with all the star catalogs and everything. Now, as technology has gotten better, we can just do. Like, oh, okay, this constellation, we've got software on our devices. Today, we've got the vantage point all at our fingertips. So where does our message begin? Now remember, we're approaching this from a Judeo-Christian perspective. So if there really is any meat to this, where does this begin? Well, let's look at Joseph. Okay, remember we talked about the pyramids earlier in our last episode? So the pyramids, they have the Sphinx, okay? The Sphinx. The Egyptian Empire built this huge structure called the Sphinx by its observatories in Giza, marking their records of how to bind the constellations together. The word Sphinx is actually interpreted to bind. So the Sphinx is the head of a woman, so it begins in Virgo, the body of a lion, Leo. So the head, the beginning, Virgo, woman. Body of a lion ends Leo. How do you bind this message together? How do you bind the constellations? You begin in Virgo and then you end in Leo. Now remember, Egyptians got their early astronomical influence from Joseph and the children of Israel hundreds of years before the betrayal. So the biblical or Hebraic approach to the beginning, remember we talked about Exodus 12, it says this is the first of the year. This indicates that there was already another calendar at play before Passover, before the Passover event. Well, Nisan is the new first month. Tishri was the head of the old calendar. So Nisan is Aries. You know the Passover, you have the slain sacrifice, Aries, Well, Virgo would have been the main constellation that Tishri is in. Virgo is the constellation during the last half of September. Notice here, trumpets begins in September. Feast of Trumpets, what does that mean? That's the Jewish New Year. The Feast of Trumpets begins the civil year. That's where their other calendar begins. Their civil calendar begins usually mid to late September. Mid to late September, look at where the sun is in the night sky. Or the sun is at. Notice where the sun is. Last half of September, it enters Virgo. Virgo points to the beginning of the calendar. You see, the story begins with Virgo the Virgin, and then it ends with Leo, the line of the tribe of Judah, returning on planet Earth. Wow. Mazzaroth approach begins with Virgo, the virgin who will birth the rule of the nations, and it ends with Leo, which reveals the rule of the line of the tribe of Judah on planet Earth. Throughout our journey, friend, together we'll come to find out that coincidence becomes evidence when dealing with the heavens, pointing us to the message of the Son of God. Why do I use the term Judeo-Christian? For my Christian friends, here's a special encouragement to you as a follower of Jesus. To my Torah friends that aren't sure about the New Testament influence concerning the Mazzaroth, we have in our ever infamous, notable passage of the salvation chapter in the book of Romans, okay? We have Romans chapter 10 that says these words, verses 17 and 18. So faith comes by hearing the word of Christ. But I ask, have they not heard? Indeed they have, for their voice has gone out all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Friends, the context is the salvation message of Jesus, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, right? Whoever confesses with his mouth Jesus is Lord and believes in his heart that God has raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. The Apostle Paul then quotes an Old Testament passage from Torah, Psalm 19. He's linking the message of Jesus and that the world has already received the messages of the stars. It's already gone out. And their teachings, they teach us. These constellations teach us. God is teaching us through his creation. What are they teaching us? The message of Jesus the Messiah. He is the Son of God. All the handiwork, everything, the sum strategy is to point the nations to Messiah, to the Son of God, the revealing of the Son of God. So friends, if you are a Christian, all the more importance, do not be afraid of the stars, but rather receive what God is speaking through the stars to you and I. How amazing is this, my friend? How amazing is this?